So let us start the another theory class under the anthelmintics, that is antitrematodal anthelmintics. So first we have to define what is the meaning of antitrematodal anthelmintics. So name itself defining the antitrematodal anthelmintics. So antitrematodal anthelmintic means the drug or anthelmintics that are used against the trematodes or flukes are called antitrematodal anthelmintics. Now we have to go through the classification. So as we know about the anthelmintic, initially we classified into three groups based upon the species. If the anthelmintics act against the roundworm or nematodes are called antinematodal. If the anthelmintic acts against the tapeworm or cestode is called anticestodal anthelmintics, that is also known as teniacidal. And the last one is antitrematodal anthelmintics. So name itself telling the drug anthelmintics used against the trematode or the flukes is called antitrematodal anthelmintics. Regarding antinematodal, anticestodal, we already discussed, and under this anthelmintic group, today is the last part of the anthelmintics, that is the antitrematodal anthelmintics. So as we know, the antitrematodal anthelmintics is primarily used to treat flukes. It or we have to also prevent the flukes or treat the flukes. Now we have to classify the antitrematodal anthelmintics. So this classification is based upon again the chemical structure, and I think among most of the group we already discussed either in antinematodal or anticestodal. And again we are going to discuss under the antitrematodal also, which is specifically for antitrematodal. Some are very specific for the flukes. Now let us start based upon the chemical structure, the classification of antitrematodal. So first one is the substituted phenols. Under this the example are nitroxynil, hexachlorophene, nicolofolone, bithionol. Amongst these all four we already discussed in anticestodal. Regarding salicylanide is concerned, we also discuss in the anticestodal. Under this, the example are clogental, refoxanide, oxyclojanide, protianide, niclosamide, and bromosalans. Here, one very interesting point with this is that the clogental and refoxanide both are also used for immature flukes, which is about 6 to 10 weeks of age. No doubt, majority of the drug under the classification of different antitrematodal anthelmintics, they are mainly acting against the adult one, and at higher dose they may also use for the immature also. But the problem is that if the drug poses a low safety of margin and if you are using higher dosage, then the chances of toxicity is more. So in this salicylanides group, clogendal and rifoxanide is also used against the immature flux in addition to adult one. Next one is the aromatics amide. In this only one drug is there and the name of drug is diphenitide. And this very interesting about this is that diphenitide is also used against the very young flux, which is about even 1 day old also. So this is very interesting. Then under the sulfonamide group as a antitrematodal, the example is the chlorsilone. So this is very important is that is the chlorsilone is a sulfonamide which used as a antitrematodal. So this is important. Then under the halogenated hydrocarbons, the very older examples amongst the drugs under the halogenated hydrocarbons is carbon tetrachloride. So this carbon tetrachloride we are using from very early time. So rather we can say this is the first drug for the flux in sheep. And other than that, under the halogenated hydrocarbon means hydrocarbon get halogenated. Hexachloroethane, then tetrachloro-difluoroethane, then hexachloroparacylene. So these all are halogenated hydrocarbons. Next group is benzimidazoles and probenzimidazole. Amongst this benzimidazole and probenzimidazole drugs are albendazole, triclibendazole, luxabendazole, fenbendazole, and the probenzimidazole is natobimine. So here very interesting thing regarding triclibendazole is concerned. All the other example are also acting against the nematodes and usually other than triclibendazole they are acting against the adult fluke, whereas triclibendazole is the interesting point is that they are used against the even 1 day old flukes. And other interesting point is that triclibendazole is is a exception and an exception that is only act against the fluke, not against the nematodes. So this is two very interesting important point concerned to triclibendazole. Now we have to go through the isoquinolines. Under this, we already discussed in the anticystodal, and the example is praziquantel. And the last one is the miscellaneous anthelmintic. Under this example are niridazole and estebofen. Regarding these two drugs is concerned, they are usually not very much in use and occasionally used for the fluke, particularly cystosomes. So niridazole and estebofen are the antitrematodal occasionally used for schistosomiasis. So this is all about the classification of antitrematodal. Now we have to go through one by one. So first one is the substituted phenol. So regarding this substituted phenols is concerned, as a group, if we go through the mechanism of action of substituted phenol, as well as salicylate, they usually possess same mechanism of action. Which one? The drug that belongs to substituted phenols and salicylanides. What is this mechanism of action? They are mainly targeting the mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation in the susceptible parasite. So they uncouple or discontinue the mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation in the susceptible parasite. And as we know, if this the purpose of this oxidative phosphorylation to finally generate the ATP, and actually this is involved in electron transport system in the susceptible parasite and finally give rise to ATP. So when this oxidative phosphorylation is get uncoupled, then this interfere in the electron transport system. Therefore, it will leads to deficiency of ATP generation. So when there is lack of ATP, it will leads to the death of the flukes. So this is the mechanism of action for both substituted phenols as well as the drug under the salicylanides. So this is about the mechanism of action. Regarding substituted phenols other property is concerned, as we discussed, they are used for the flux. So this one is used for the liver flux as they possess low safety of margin. And nowadays we also have the choice for better safer drug. So first drug under this is nitroxynil. So nitroxynil is available as injectable preparation and its salt is called nitroxynil meglumine. Regarding mechanism of action that we already discussed, it interfere, uncouple mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation and therefore it will decrease the ATP generation of the susceptible fluke and therefore fluke get paralyzed and killed. And this nitroxynil is particularly produce death in adult fluke. So this is important. This drug is used for the adult fluke as well as the other blood sucking nematodes. So other blood sucking nematodes example are like Haemonchus contortus. So this is, and as we already mentioned, this poses low safety of margin. And because they are mainly concerned to the mechanism of action oxidative phosphorylation, they are also affect the host on the mammalian mitochondrial system. Regarding a spectrum of activity of nitroxynil is concerned, as we mentioned, they are active against the adult Phaeacula heptica, also blood-sucking nematodes like Haemonchus. At this adult activity against the Phaeacula, this nitroxynil is also active against 6-week-old flukes in cattle and sheep, as well as the fly larvae stress ovis at higher dose. So you can say usually when we are going through nitroxynil at therapeutic dose, they are active mainly against the adult Phaeacula hepatica, but when we use at higher dose, then it may kill the flukes of 6-week old as well as the fly larvae like stress ovis. But usually we have to increase the dose up to 2 times of the therapeutic dose. This drug nitroxynil is also used against the gapeworm, that is Syngamus, that we know that gapeworm is found in the game birds. So this one is nitroxynil is also used for the gapeworm, syngamus in game birds. Regarding efficacy, as we mentioned, against the fluke, nematodes, regarding its efficacy against the paraemphyostomum that we know that is the found in the GI gastrointestinal tract. So against the paraemphyostomum, nitroxynil is possessing low efficacy in sheep and cattle, as well as immature fluke in the liver parenchyma that we already discussed. For the immature fluke, uh, 6 week old, we have to use higher dose of the nitroxynil. Regarding side effect of the nitroxynil is concerned, the safety margin is about 4 times of the therapeutic dose. Usually, if we analyze all the antitrematodal or other anthelmintic, we will find if we will administer the anthelmintic in a poorly nourished animal or severe dehydrated or severe parasitic load infested animal, in these cases animal will actually, the drug is going to produce some type of adverse effect. So poor nourished animal or heavily infested parasitic infection and infested animal, in that this may show the adverse effect of the drug. So if we are going to use the higher dose, be cautious in these type of animal. Regarding the toxicity, I mean adverse and side effect is concerned, the side effect like blindness and hyperthermia, hyperventilation, convulsion and tachycardia and death last we have to see, and this is only because of the uncoupling of the mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation. Nitroxynil also stain the wool with wool and hair yellow color, and it also passes in the milk, so it is not recommended in the lactating animals. So many drugs you will find they come in the milk, and therefore we have to use the drug with causes in lactating animal. So this is about the nitroxynil. Nitroxynil activity that we already mentioned, act against the adult or mature Fasciola hepatica, and also against some of the nematode or roundworms in ruminant. Also, we already discussed it act against the gape worm in the game birds, and we also discussed that higher dose it may produce activity against the immature fluke that is of the above 6 week old. Regarding its dose is concerned, nitroxynil, in cattle and sheep, it is 10 mg per kg body weight subcutaneously. For game bird, it is about 24 mg per kg orally in drinking water. So this is all about the nitroxynil. In the same substituted phenol, the another drug is hexachlorophene. Under the hexachlorophene, the first this is used also as an anthelmintic and also act as a skin disinfectant. Is about the hexachlorophene. Likewise, similar to clogental, it is also acting against usually adult liver fluke in ruminant and human being, and it also poses some activity against the cystode in ruminant and canine. Usually, hexachlorophene is not effective against the fluke which is of less than 8 weeks of the age in when the fasciola is in the liver. So as we mentioned, usually the substituted phenol is acting against the mature or adult flukes. So this is adult liver fluke. So this is important. If even though you want to increase the activity against the immature, then you have to increase the dose. This hexachlorophene is not recommended in lactating cow. and the region is only one because it is passing out through the milk, so this is not recommending for the lactating cow. Regarding the dose of hexachlorophene is concerned, the dose in sheep and cattle is about 25 mg per kg orally or subcutaneously. Next drug is nicolofolone. So nicolofolone is nothing, this is actually analog of hexachlorophene. Similarly, this is again similar to the hexachlorophene, similar to the nitroxynil. They are acting against the mature fistula in sheep, cattle, and pig. And as we mentioned in the nitroxynil at higher dose, it may show efficacy against the immature fistula at higher dose. So, but the higher dose, we be cautious about the higher dose because of its safety. Regarding nicolofolone dose is concerned, for cattle, sheep, and pig, it is about 3 to 5 mg per kg body weight orally. And the last one under the substituted phenol is the bithionol. Bithionol is showing activity against cystode and trematode. Regarding antitrematodal activity or activity against trematode of substituted phenol, biphenol is concerned, they are active against the rumen and liver fluke like paraempyostomum and fasciola, but it is against the adult. Biphenol is more against the adult fluke than the immature. So as we found in under the all example of the substituted phenol, whether it is nitroxynil, whether it is hexachlorophene, whether it is nicolofolone, whether it is bithionol, they are mainly showing good activity against the mature or adult liver fluke. And this bithionol is also to be used in combination with the hexachlorophene to produce high efficacy in combination. So the dose of biphenol is concerned for cattle and sheep is about 60 mg per kg body weight orally or in feed. So this is all about the substituted phenol. Now we have to go through the second group, that is salicylanides. Under this, the example of the drug against the antitremators are very good, and the example are clogental, rifaxitinib, oxyclogenide, niclosamide, bromosolans, but these two clogental as well as the rifaxitinib is important that we initially mentioned that they are also acting against the immature fluke, not only immature but also against the adult fluke. So this is important. The clogental and rifaxitinib is specifically showing very good activity against the juvenile and adult flukes, as well as salicylate is active against the blood-sucking nematodes similar to the substituted phenol, against the Haemonchus, hookworm, and tissue invading grubs of flies, stress, and hypoderma. So this is about the nutshell about the salicylanides. Now we have to go through the mechanism of action. Regarding mechanism of action is concerned, as a group that have the same mechanism of action with the substituted phenol that we already discussed, that is uncoupling of mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation in susceptible parasite, and therefore it interfere in ATP synthesis and ATP deficiency, and therefore it finally leads to the parasite death. Under this, the drug is the clogental. So clogental, we have to discuss about clogental, that is coming both as a oral and injectable preparation. Regarding mechanism of action that we already discussed, now we have to go through its activity. So the both the clogental as well as the rifaxitinib is active against the fluke, which one is adult as well as the juvenile. Juvenile or particularly the age, the fluke age is between 6 to 10 week old. So adult as well as the juvenile parasite or fluke is susceptible. Juvenile age is fluke age is 6 to 10 week old. Similarly, in this is also is in case of the drug refoxanide. So refoxanide as well as the clogental both are acting against the adult as well as the juvenile fluke of 6 to 10 week old, as well as they are also acting against the nematodes, that is the particularly the blood sucking nematodes like adult hookworms, Haemoncus, and also acting against the some tapeworm. The clogental is also showing the activity against the fluke of the GI tract paraamphistosum and also against the some arthropods. The example of arthropods are mangemites, ticks, parasitic larvae of flies. Clogental is also showing against the activity against the Strongus vulgaris, gastrophilus species in horses, and interestingly, as we already mentioned in previous class also, that clogental is also a good choice for those worms that are resistant to the benzimidazole. So for the benzimidazole resistant Haemoncus, we have to use the clogental as a alternative drug. So this is important. So regarding its pharmacokinetic is concerned, clogental is extensively bound to plasma protein, particularly albumin. Safety of margin is about 6 times of the therapeutic dose, and similar to the substituted phenols and salicylanides, they show adverse effect in the species like the weak, malnutrition, and severely stressed animal. So this is very, very important. The clogental is also showing embryo toxicity. Regarding therapeutic use of the clogental is concerned, that we already discussed, this is flucoside in species like sheep and goat. They are also acting against the flucoside means that is the fluke, hepatica flux, and also against the nematodes, that is particularly the blood-sucking nematodes, and also against the susceptible tapeworm. This is all we already discussed. This clogental is also active against the Haemoncus, that is the contortus in sheep, resistant to the ivermectin, benzimidazole, levamisole, morental, and refoxanide. So this is very, very important point about the clogental that we already discussed. Clogental is having very good choice for Haemoncus, that Haemoncus is, is or are showing resistant against the drug either benzimidazole, ivermectin, levamisole, morental, and refoxanide. Regarding the dose of clogental is concerned in cattle and sheep is 10 mg per kg orally and 5 mg per kg subcutaneously. So this is about the dose. Now we have to discuss about the another drug of the group same salicylanides is refoxanide. Regarding its activity, we already discussed initially. This is also acting against the nematode Haemoncus, blood-sucking nematode Haemoncus. Also active against the parasitic larval stage sheep nasal boat stress ovis. So this is important for the refoxanide. Not only acting against the adult and immature flukes, Fasciola flukes, also acting against the nematodes, blood-sucking nematodes like Haemoncus, also acting against the larval stage sheep nasal boat, that is the stress ovis, and similar to the previous clogental is extensively bound with the protein, which is about 99%, more than 99%, and margin of safety is about 6 times of its therapeutic dose. And as the withdrawal period is very high, so we don't prefer to give for the lactating cows. Regarding dose of refoxanide is concerned in sheep and cattle, which is about 7.5 mg per kg orally, and for cattle is 3 mg per kg subcutaneously. Next, under this group is two drugs is left, oxychlorogenide and niclosamide. So as other than clogental and refoxanide, they are acting against the adult flukes. So they are acting against the adult flukes, oxychlorogenide. Its preparation is coming in oral form. So oxychlorogenide is the fasciculocide acting against the adult fluke. Therapeutic efficacy is about 4 times of the therapeutic dose, and the oxychlorogenide should be used alone or in combination with the other anthelmintic like levamisole, and is a broad spectrum. When we combine, usually it becomes broad spectrum. Now the dose is of oxychlorogenide is concerned. This is in cattle and sheep is 10 to 15 mg per kg orally. So this is about the dose of oxychlorogenide. And the last one is niclosamide. Here you have to put O, niclosamide. So niclosamide is the halogenated salicylate, and in this group, niclosamide is primarily for the cystode. No doubt they are also acting against the trematode, but primarily activity of niclosamide is against the cystode, that is the anticystodal, and also showing some activity against the fluke, not particularly the liver fluke, that is acting against the intestinal fluke, that is the paraemphyostomum in ruminants. So this is all about the salicylanides. Now we have to move on the another group, that is the aromatic amides, and is this the drug is diamphenythide. Regarding diamphenythide is concerned, very important point is that this is the drug that is acting against both immature and mature liver fluke. Even diamphenythide is acting against the immature larvae of 1 day old of the liver fluke. So they are very high activity against the youngest immature form of the liver fluke, and their activity is reducing towards the mature fluke. So this is very important point with regarding the diamphenythide is concerned. Regarding its mechanism of action is concerned, its action is quite similar to a drug we call the praziquantel. Praziquantel is the isoquinoline's drug. So praziquantel, one of the mechanism of action is going to produce the vacuole in the outer layer of the fluke. So similarly, diamphenythide mechanism of action is concerned, they form the active metabolites component that we call amine metabolite, which is acting on the liver fluke, and this metabolite is producing its activity against the immature flukes by producing the vacuolation of fluke tegument, means fluke outer layer, and induces the paralysis. So this is the mechanism of action of the diamphenythide. As we already mentioned regarding activity of diamphenythide, that is only one drug under the aromatic amine age, very active against the very young fasciola fluke, that is even 1 day to 9 weeks of age in sheep. So this is very important, and even a single dose of diamphenythide is going to eliminate about 100% a young fluke. And as we mentioned, their flukicidal activity is reducing towards the mature, and for a same single dose, it kills about 60 to 70% of mature fluke. So its activity against the mature fluke is reducing as compared to the day-old fluke. So diamphenetide is showing no activity against the flukes in cattle. That means that they are specifically for the sheep. So this is very, very important that diamphenetide is specifically for the fluke found in the sheep. Regarding a space adverse and side effect of the diamphenetide is concerned, the therapeutic efficacy is about 4 times of therapeutic dose, so and not given to the lactating sheep because it is going through the milk, and if the human get consumed then it is problem. And also this is also found in the meat. Diamphenetide activity is concerned, clinical use is concerned, is acting against the young fluke in sheep, and diamphenetide is usually used in combination with the anthelmintic, particularly antitrematodal, showing activity against the adult flukes, and that is the adulticide. As a prophylaxis measure, the combination of diamphenetide and rifaxitinib is available. The preparation for the oral is coming for the sheep, and the dose of diamphenetide for sheep is 100 mg per kg orally. So this is all about the diamphenetide. Next group is the sulfonamides. So as we already mentioned, under the sulfonamide group, antitrematodal anthelmintic, the chlorsilone is the only one example for the sulfonamide. Similar to the salicylenides, substituted phenol, they have very good tilt towards the adult liver fluke. So this sulfonamide chlorsidone is also showing activity against the adult fluke, and this is coming, chlorsidone is coming in both injectable as well as the oral preparation for ruminants. Regarding mechanism of action is concerned, as we also mentioned this about the mechanism of action of most of the anthelmintic, and we already seen they are mainly targeting the energy system of the susceptible worm. Likewise, this chlorcinone is also mainly concerned to the glycolytic, it hinders the glycolytic pathway. So if there is a inhibition of or interference in the glycolytic pathway of susceptible parasite, then the worms deprive of the energy or metabolic energy. So if no energy, so how the parasite will survive? Regarding chlorcinol is concerned, they also interfere the glycolytic pathway by inhibiting two enzymes, that is phosphoglycerate kinase and phosphoglycerate mutase, and these two enzymes are actually participating in the glycolytic pathway, and therefore the parasite get deprived of metabolic energy and thus die. Regarding a spectrum activity of chlorsilone is concerned, we already mentioned that chlorsilone is mainly for the adult Fistula hepatica both in sheep and cattle, and less effective against the Fistula magna. So important is that regarding the fluke, it is mainly activity against the Fistula hepatica, less against the magna, and ineffective against the intestinal fluke, that is the paraemphyostomum. So this is all about the chlorsilone. At high dosage, they may show efficacy against the younger fluke of 8 weeks of old. And as the drug chlorsidone is lipophilic, so it will absorb well and also bound very much with the plasma protein. And as it get bind with the plasma protein or RBC, the blood sucking flux when taking this plasma protein or RBC, the drug is coming in the worms and therefore it produces its mechanism of action. Regarding adverse and side effect of the chlorsilone is concerned, the therapeutic efficacy is very good. That is about the 25 times of the therapeutic dose, and it is not recommended the similar to the other drug for the dairy cattle that is producing the milk. Regarding its use is concerned, it is flucoside used for the cattle and sheep, then available in orally so that we may administer as a drench for cattle and sheep, and also we have the parenteral administration subcut, so we may administer subcut in case of cattle. Chlorsilone is often combined with the drug other anthelmintic like ivermectin and administered subcutaneously so that it will help to treat the fasciola as well as the nematodes in the cattle. Regarding the withdrawal period of the chlorsilone is concerned, which is about 8 days, 8 days to slaughter the animal, and the dose is concerned in the species like cattle and sheep, the dose is about 7 mg per kg orally. For cattle, 4 mg orally, and chlorsilone 2 mg per kg, ivermectin 0.2 mg per kg, and that is coming as in subcutaneous administration and is in combined form. Now we have to go through the another group of antitrematodal anthelmintic, and that group is halogenated hydrocarbon. So under the halogenated carbon, as we know, the example is very good example. So what about the very good example? The very good example is carbon tetrachloride. That, as we know, this is one of the very oldest drug that are used for the liver fluke or fluke in case of sheep. So carbon tetrachloride, so that the group is halogenated hydrocarbon. So hydrocarbon get halogenated like carbon tetrachloride, then the hexachloroethane, then the tetrachloro-difluoroethane, then the last one is a hexachloroparacylene. And they are widely used for the trematode, this one particularly carbon tetrachloride. Before the entry of the new flucocidal, because the halogenated hydrocarbon are having very narrow margin of safety, and because of its toxicity they are nowadays is not very much in use. Particularly carbon tetrachloride is used in sheep, still we are using in sheep. So now we have to discuss about the drug. So first drug is the carbon tetrachloride, CCl4. This is a assumption or presumption that carbon tetrachloride is the first drug introduced for the treatment of the fasciola. Particularly if we go through the concern to the species, particularly for the sheep. So this is very, very important point. Regarding mechanism of action of carbon tetrachloride is concerned, the drug is mainly concerned to interfere in the cholesterol biosynthesis. So when the drug carbon tetrachloride interfere the cholesterol synthesis of the susceptible parasite, therefore the methyl esterol get accumulated to the extent of toxic amount, and therefore it will lead to the killing of the susceptible parasite, and that metabolite is usually the toxic metabolite. which is lethal to the liver fluid. So the mechanism of action is to interfere the cholesterol biosynthesis. Therefore, the toxic concentration of methyl estrol is get accumulated, and therefore it produce the killing effect on the susceptible parasite. Regarding its spectrum is concerned, as you mentioned, this is active against the adult fascicular fluke in sheep, particularly sheep, and usually not showing activity against the immature liver fluke. In addition to the activity against the fascicular fluke, also activity against the nematode, particularly the blood-sucking nematode, and also against the nematodes like encyclostoma, Hemancus, and bunostomum, and the species are dogs and cats, and cattle and sheep respectively. Here I am going to mention one very important point is that usually when you go through the antitrematodal drug, they you will find the majority of the drug are also acting against the blood sucking nematodes and mainly acting against the adult one. Only few of the examples that we have already mentioned under the benzimidazole, it is triclavendazole, then it is aromatic amines, that is the one example is there in the that is the example is diamphenetide. So diamphenetide, triclavendazole, they are very much active against immature also, and also the some that are acting against the immature are the clogental and rifaxitinide, but the age is the 6 to 10 week old, rifaxitinide and clogental. So this is about the so we are discussing in this about the carbon tetrachloride. So carbon tetrachloride is active against the blood sucking nematodes also. Likewise, the other antitrematodal, they are also acting against the blood sucking nematodes. Regarding adverse side effect of the carbon tetrachloride is concerned, that is possessing narrow margin of safety and also showing the host toxicity against the all mammals, specifically against the swine. So swine is very much susceptible to carbon tetrachloride toxicity. So this is very very important. And regarding this toxicity is concerned, the carbon tetrachloride is not recommended to use in the species like swine, horse, and cat because of its high toxicity. So this is the important point with the carbon tetrachloride, not recommended to use in the species like swine, horses, and cats. So this one is used widely to treat the fasciolosis in veterinary practices, particularly in sheep, and the dose for the sheep is about up to 4 ml orally. And if you want to reduce its toxicity, that is also you have to give with the liquid paraffin. The next drug under the halogenated hydrocarbon is hexachloroethane. So similar to the carbon tetrachloride, that are also acting against the adult fascicular fluke in sheep and cattle, and other point is also it is also acting against the blood sucking nematodes like Hemancus and Trichostrongylus, but not used against the intestinal nematode in ruminant, particularly Paraampiostomum. So that is not active against the Paraampiostomum, that is the intestinal nematodes of ruminants. The drug hexachlorophene possessing the narrow safety of margin that we already discussed. This one is widely used for the sheep, which one carbon tetrachloride. Then the last one is the hexachloroparexylene, that we are not going to discuss much more about this. So now we have to come to the next group, that is the benzimidazole and probenzimidazole. Under the benzimidazole is concerned, the drug are albendazole, triclabendazole, luxabendazole, fenbendazole, and the probenzimidazole is the netobimine. That we already knowing that netobimine is a prodrug and it converted into active metabolite drug albendazole. Which one? Netobimine. So its active constituent is the albendazole. Regarding albendazole is concerned, as we already discussed while discussing through the drug for the antinematodal or the roundworm, its mechanism of action is already we already discussed. But again, I am going to mention the point, that is the drug is particularly going to bind with the beta tubulin, and therefore it inhibits the polymerization, and therefore it produces the inhibit the formation of the tubules. So this is about the mechanism of action of the albendazole. So this is albendazole is the broad spectrum because it is also acting against the nematodes, also against the cystode also, and its dose for the fluke is for particularly for the adult fluke, and also higher dose, and the single dose in cattle and sheep is showing activity against the adult fluke. High dose of this albendazole is required to kill the immature fluke, and not very young one, but immature fluke is also going to be killed by albendazole, and therefore because of that this is not very much effective against the immature fluke to eliminate completely. So this is important point. Next drug under this benzimidazole and probenzimidazoles group is the triclabendazole, and you can say that triclabendazole is the one drug under the benzimidazole and probenzimidazole prodrug. This triclabendazole is somewhat possessing the different property as compared to other benzimidazoles and or probenzimidazole. What this difference? The difference is that this triclabendazole is showing no activity against the nematodes and cystode. However, other than triclabendazole imidazoles, they are showing activity against nematodes and cystode, like the albendazole, fenbendazole, mebendazole. So this is very interesting point. Other interesting point with triclabendazole is that this is very good efficacy against the fasciola of all stages, whether it is the immature or it is the mature. Immature, see here, the even 1 day old is going to be killed by this triclabendazole. So this is very interesting. And in the same 1 day old is concerned, if the drug like diamphenethide is also having the same type of property, but there the adult are less active, so they are active from day old to adult. Now this is a flucoside and very much used in the cattle, sheep, goat, and horses, and used through the oral route, and very good therapeutic, good safety of margin, and also not teratogenic, mutagenic, embryotoxicity. So this is about the triclabendazole. But other point with that, withdrawal period is too high, 28 days. So be cautious to use in the lactating animal. It is also used in combination to enhance its efficacy, and the triclabendazole is coming with the ivermectin, and this is used to treat the fasciola hepatica of both immature and the adult liver fluke, also against the roundworm and ectoparasite. So you can say ivermectin is added with the triclabendazole to make it broaden, that show the activity against the roundworms and the ectoparasite. Regarding its dose is concerned, for the sheep and goat, which is about 10 mg per kg orally, and for cattle and sheep is about 12 mg per kg orally. So this is all about the triclabendazole. Another drug under the same group is luxabendazole. Luxabendazole is also a broad spectrum, a good activity against the adult as well as 6 week old flukes. So this is important point, and used mainly in the sheep, and also showing some activity against the nematodes in ruminant. Is well tolerated drug because of the high therapeutic index, and not teratogenic, mutagenic, and carcinogenic. So its activity for the flukes of 6 week old as well as the adult luxabendazole is also a good choice, and the dose for the and also used mainly for the sheep, and the dose is 10 mg per kg orally. Next, and the next in this is only two drug, fenbendazole and netobimine. Netobimine, we are not going to discuss much more about netobimine, because netobimine, as we know, the active metabolite is the albendazole. So whatsoever the albendazole activity have, netobimine is also think that may have netobimine also the same. That means they are acting against the mature fistula, also active against the dicrocilium dendriticum, and showing no activity against the rumen fluke. This is about the netobimine. Regarding fenbendazole is concerned, is a broad spectrum, also acting against the roundworm antinematodal, and also the adult fluke, which include also dicrocilium dendriticum, Phaceula gigantica. So very important, Phaceula gigantica, this species, and the adult and migrating immature intestinal fluke, that is the paraemphiostomum. So this is very good choice also, fenbendazole. So this is all about the benzimidazoles and probenzimidazole groups, and the next one is the isoquinolines. Under this, the drug is praziquantel. Under this praziquantel, about the mechanism of action, about everything we already discussed. And this is the drug praziquantel is the specifically anti-cystodal drug. So the drug is the primarily used for the cystode. So we generally don't prefer to use this praziquantel under the isoquinoline for the antitrematodal, because of its cost also expensive in nature, particularly for the ruminant. But if required, you may use also against the flukes in dogs. So praziquantel is also active against the lungs fluke, gut, blood, and liver fluke. So this is all about the praziquantel. Now we have to go through the next and the last group is the miscellaneous anthelmintic. Under the miscellaneous anthelmintic, the drug are niridazole and stibofen. What is interesting about these two drugs is that both the drug is specifically for trematode of genus Cystoma. So both niridazole as well as the stibofen are the drug for the cystosoma, and this drug showing the mechanism of action over the glycolysis. So they interfere in the glycolysis, so interfere in the ATP synthesis, and therefore this drug is going to kill the cystoma. So we have to discuss about this nitrazole is having the certain activity against the cystosoma, that is a trematode. So cystosoma sites, it inhibits the particularly insusceptible parasite, it inhibits the glycolysis, so energy deficit, and therefore fluke will die, because it detached from where it grip the grip the muscle or tissues. It is occasionally used as a schistosomiasis because of its toxicity, you can say, because of its adverse effect, both niridazole as well as the stibofen. It also inhibits particularly niridazole spermatogenesis and oogenesis for the niridazole. About stibofen is concerned, this is an anti-money derivative and is acting against the trematode particularly that we already discussed cystosoma, and they are also affecting the glycogen pathway, that is the glycolysis pathway, and inhibiting the glycolysis and use against the, so on this glycolysis pathway the chlorsilone is also acting. So chlorsilone is also acting on the chlorsilone is also acting on the same glycolytic pathway by inhibiting two enzymes that we already discussed. So this is all about your last class under the anthelmintic, and in next class we have to discuss the new drug. So that's all.